and it's being recorded right now. Let me get the clock back up into the area where everything is recorded. So this way it is easier for you to find the material in the lecture. You just have to write down the time and it's easy to kind of zero into the time that you want. All right, so we are pretty much done with module 0012. So we are done with home, assignment statements, assignment operation, and just a general idea of a sequence. Do we have any questions about this topic before we move on to the next module? Because we're going to start on conditional statements today. I'm done with that entire module. So, but I've been working on it, since last week and, kind of partially release the portion that had been ready already. So are we good? Are we ready to move on? What about the homework assignment? Do you guys have any question about the homework assignment? Do you want me to talk about it? Not? Yes? Okay, all right. We'll go ahead and talk about the homework assignment. All right. So the homework assignment, which is assignment one, which is due about a minute ago. So hopefully everybody remember where to send it in. In other words, my actual identity, which is here and that's um in the to share it. But I forgot to put in the entire email address. So that's why I also use the announcement to announce it several times. Okay, can you hold on? If I'm already speaking, can you kind of have to wait until I'm done with talking, and then I can try to address what you have to say. So I sent two announcements about what email address to use. Hopefully you guys kind of read that and send it to the right address. Okay, go ahead. Now we can go ahead. Um, well, sure. Okay. Yeah, but it's probably better in the future, if possible, to schedule those things, not during the class time. But I understand. Okay. Hmm. All right. So where we yep, doing the homework assignment. All right. So I am going to basically do what you guys did before, okay, which is go to here and look at the code and find out how to trace it. So the thing is, I want you guys to also follow all the standards, all the ways that I trace the program. So the best way to do this, okay, is not to use this view because I cannot show both the um, pseudocode or the algorithm and the trace at the same time this way. So I'm going to shrink this window a little bit here, like so, and then open the trace in its own window. And I believe that is doable. I just have to, okay, I have to open the new tab or new window first, okay, and get this one out. Move tab to a new window. There we go. Put the URL back here, and then have the second one to focus on the trace. Actually, that's not what I want to do because I have to follow my own instruction. So I have to make a copy of the file first. So make a copy, and I'll make a copy into the share folder. You guys can see all that. And I will name it in today's date, 2025-0203, and share with the same people, make a copy. Now I can kind of break it up into two parts. So this is the part where the algorithm is, and then the other part is where the trace is going to be. So let me move this to a new window. There we go. Okay, so now it should work. All right. So this is going to be focusing on just the code, and this is just going to be focusing on the trace. All right. So the first thing is how many columns do we need? We need one column for the line number. We need one column for each variable that we use. So we have two variables in this case. We have variable x. We also have variable y. Okay. And then the first line is always known as pre, which is basically saying, okay, are we making any assumptions about the values of x and y before the code starts? In this case, they would both be unknown. Okay, so you need to put a question mark here to indicate that the both variables start with an unknown value. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So if you look at the module, okay, if you look at okay, let me see. Yep, it is this one. So when you look at this particular program, it looks very similar to the one that you have. And with this one, because I did not tell you anything about the values of x and y ahead of time, so that's why they are unknown. And your assignment is basically the same thing with just a little bit more, a few more lines. So that's why, in your homework assignment, you kind of have to use the same format, which is making sure that you make me know that x and y are both unknown. So now we get to line one, and line one at the end, after we execute line one, then x, becomes 0. It's only until after line one is completed that x ends up with a value of 0. So the pre should not say anything about x. So after line two, in this case, y gets x, so y would also end up with a value of x, which is also 0 in this case. And then after line three, at that point, we want x to get x plus 2. So we look at the column for x. It currently has a value of 0. 0 plus 2 is 2, and 2 becomes the right-hand side. The value of the right-hand side is used to change the left-hand side. The left-hand side is just x, so that means by the time line 3 is completed, x ends up with a value of 2, and then we move on to line 4. Line 4 says y gets y plus y, so y has a value of 0. 0 plus 0 is still a 0, so that means y ends up with a value of 0 again in this case. So even though the value has not changed, but because it is the result of an assignment, I still want to have a number here to indicate that there is an update. It's just that the updated value is the same as what it used to be. Okay, and I don't know whose phone it is. Certainly hope it's not mine. Okay, okay, all right. So one thing that is good about Android and iOS, because these days they all have that feature, is to use the do not disturb feature. In depending on which phone you have, you can either have it to follow your calendar, which means on your calendar you can put the class time into your calendar, and then your do not disturb feature can automatically disable the ringer and all the other things automatically. I have a Samsung which does not link to my calendar, so I actually have to create a schedule for when the do not disturb feature is activated. Yeah, but I have one schedule for each class that I teach, so this way it automatically turns off, and then after the class it automatically turns back on. I don't have to worry about that. Oh, great! I was just using it, and it decides, oh, you have not been using it for a while. Let me log you out. Okay, well, looks like it's not really signed out, so I'm not sure why it says it is signed out. Okay, it's all good here, and I believe it should be all good here too. Okay, that's just kind of weird. All right, all right, so that's line 4, and then on line 5, x gets y plus 1, so that means I have to look up the value of y. Y plus 1, y is 0, so y plus 1 is 1. So now x is overwritten with the value of 1. And we put a post here to indicate that the algorithm trace is now completed. So that is the output, or that's the kind of format that I'm expecting from assignment 1, which is all about your tracing assignment statements. Do we have any questions about this? Yes, go ahead. You do not. Yeah, if you put it in, I won't mark it wrong. Because it only sets because when a cell is blank, we just look up the column to the first value to know what is the current value of that particular variable. But if you want to re-emphasize, as a post condition, that is not wrong either. Mhm. All right. Any other questions about this assignment? Yep, go ahead. Say again? Yes. Well, that's easy because I am dumb and I'm just following instructions. Okay? So that I said that, only as a half joke, okay? Because the most important part of this class is to follow the instructions. So the question is, when we have an assignment operation, what do we do? What does the instructions say that we should do when we have an assignment operation? Okay, there are two steps, okay, two distinct steps. The first one is to evaluate the right-hand side. Okay, whatever the value of the right-hand side is used to update the left-hand side. So that is the case for every single assignment operation. In other words, when we say on line 2, y equals to x, it is only taking a snapshot of the value of x at that time of the execution of the algorithm. Okay, so that's why, when at this time, x had a value of 0 and y is just getting the same value. Now, later on, which other line were you asking about? Line 4? Okay, so when we get to line 4 or line 3, which one are we? Line 4? Uh-huh. So when we get to line 4, we look up the value of y at that time, which was a 0. 0 plus 0 is still a 0. So the right-hand side evaluates to 0, and then we use that 0 to update the left-hand side, which turns out to be variable y as well. So when we say y equals x, we are not establishing the value of y is going to follow the value of x. That is not what that statement says at all. It is saying evaluate the right-hand side and then use that value to update the left-hand side. One shot only. Okay, so that's so I'm glad you asked that question because a mathematician would have asked, oh, so if we change the value of y somewhere in between, or if we change the value of x, wouldn't that also change the value of y? The answer is no. They are completely independent. Okay, so that's a very good question to ask because it helps to differentiate between those two concepts. But more importantly, you have to follow the instructions. So the instruction of the assignment operation says you evaluate the right-hand side, then use it to update the left-hand side. So that's kind of the key because when the expression may look like it is suggesting one thing, but what we do is we just follow the instruction. Is that okay? All right. Okay. Yeah, so that's good. Okay, I'm glad that we had a chance to talk about this because this is a point of your confusion. I can see that. But at the same time, it is also a good time to kind of talk about, the importance of this class because what we do in this class is going to be boring. Okay, well, okay, for certain people, it's going to look boring because what we are doing is we are just imitating what the machine is supposed to do on, with the same kind of code. But the importance of doing that is so that we understand when we write this statement it really means this to the machine. When we write this statement, it means this to the machine. Because without understanding that, it would not be possible for us to actually write programs effectively. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, we need to know what each statement does, so that we can write the code. Do we have any questions back there? Okay, are you sure? Okay, all right. And if you have already turned in the assignment, please do not update the document because as I talk about the solution, if it's a Google document, I don't want people to update the document to reflect the correct answer. Yep, yep. I just want to say that. Alrighty. Um, any additional questions related to this assignment? Yep. Um, yes. So I would not mark it wrong in this case, but we are also using a notation where we do not repeat a value. So let me go back to what I'm. Let me go point back to what I mean by that. So in this notation here, do you see there's a missing value here and a missing value here? And it was explained, down here that, if a value is not changed, it is not the target. Is If it's not the left-hand side of an assignment, then we leave it blank. So that is part of the standard that we have to follow. So we don't want to carry over, the value of 6 right here, because line 2 in this particular program in the text does not do anything with the variable x. So you can see this is line 2, this is line 2. Line 2 has y as its left-hand side, x is not the left-hand side, so x is not getting updated. So a blank means, we just look up the column to find out, what was the value when the variable was last updated. But I won't mark it wrong this time, okay? But in the future, please use this particular format, because okay, you guys will know why, pretty, I think when by the time we get to loops, you guys will go like, okay, I don't want to write down the value every single time because then it'll be super tedious. This way, we are only writing a value in the cell when it is on the left-hand side of an assignment operation. Okay, so that was a good question too. Any other questions about assignment before we move on to conditional statements? Yep, go ahead. Okay. That would be okay too. Okay, it depends on how assignment one is described. So when we read the instruction of assignment one, if you do both the trace and put it onto the same sheet as the um, description, that depends on how it is described. Let me take a look here. Well, the assignment this instruction did say that trace it in the trace tab. So that means you did not exactly follow the instruction. It's on a different sheet, on the same document but different sheet. So you can see how there's a tab called code, which is a sheet, and there's also another tab called trace here. Yep. So maybe the first time I'm not gonna take any points off for not following the instructions, but in the future, please read carefully and follow the instructions. I know this is not like high school or elementary school. Why do we have to follow the instructions to the teeth? Why do you think that is actually important? Think about a job situation. Okay, does anyone know what it is like to be a software engineer? Okay, okay. I can describe a little bit of, what it is like, what it entails, right? So software engineers, they develop software, but more importantly, they are quote unquote engineers, which means, whatever they develop has to work with something else or someone else. Okay, so if it's someone else, for the most part, that person can adjust to, changes that you have made and still go like, yeah, I still understand what it means. Okay, even though this is not exactly what I described it in the first place. But when it needs to interface to another system, and let's say, the other system expects, something to be spelled in plural, okay, and in your code you decide to spell in singular, okay, a person would be able to look at both and go like, not a problem. Okay, I still understand what you mean. But if your program is interfacing with another program, then the other program would not be able to understand that because the words are different. So that's why, following the instructions and reading specifications very carefully is actually very important in software engineering and code development and just about anything that is computer science related. Yep. Mm-hmm. Correct. Yep. 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 So because in this case, this is what I would call a specification. So if I did not mention this in the specification, then I cannot take points off because there's no ground for me to take points off. And in the real world, if it is not part of the specification, then they cannot really expect you to, oh, you have to do it this way. But it wasn't in the specification. I do not know that I need to do it in that specific way. But if something is in the specification, then you really need to understand, oh, okay, this is specified and I really need to do it that way. Now, if you don't understand the specification, which happens a lot in industry as well, then you have to ask people or look things up so that you can understand, okay, if I read the specification here, I can interpret it in three different ways. Which way is the right way to interpret it? If you have that question, you always want to clarify with somebody else before you make a commitment and go like, okay, I'm going to choose interpretation two. You always want to make sure that you're using the correct interpretation. All right. So these are all very important points, in the long run. Okay. It's not just because the tech is a little bit uptight about, all these little details, but because you're paying attention to details is actually important in this type of career. All right. All right. Cool. So any other questions about the homework assignment? All right. So now we can move on to the next module. Okay, before I go there, let me illustrate or show you guys where to find it. So from your perspective, okay, let me go back to your student view so that you can see how things should look like on your end and where to find the material. So most of you already know about, okay, we just go sequential. Okay, that's one thing about the way I arrange things. It's just sequential. When we are done with this module, the next one is okay, that's the homework assignment, and then the next one is conditions and conditional statements. So that's what we are going to be talking about today. I also sent an announcement, I believe, that this is what we'll be talking about. In the announcement, I think I said I'm working on it, but the portion that is ready is available to you already. And now it is all done. Okay, so this module is complete. So, if you have just started to read it up to the point where I just released, that's perfectly okay. Okay, not a problem. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at what that module has to say. That would be module 0013, which is titled Conditions and Conditional Statements. Yes, go ahead. Hmm. I believe both will work. If you submit it using the submission, you still need to make sure that I have access to it. So you still have to share it with me. Uh-huh. That will work too. But you have to share with the right email address, as the announcement says. Yeah. As long as you did that, that will be fine. Yep. And for people who send it to the wrong or share to the wrong email address, you can still right now change the sharing without changing the content of the document. So you can change how it is shared without the content, and you can still do it now. I won't hold anything against people who go like, oh, I shared it with the wrong email address. I now need to make sure that I share with the right address. That's okay, not a problem. All right, so this is the second big module that we are going to talk about, which is about conditions and conditional statements. With assignment statements, we have a fantastic way of changing the values of variables. Okay, and variables can depend on each other and so on and so forth. But we have a problem because we cannot deviate from the flow of how the statements are expressed. So line two always follows line one, line 3 always follows line 2, and so on. So there are certain times where you go like, but I don't want to follow this flow. Okay, there are certain times where I want to skip to this section here, or only with certain conditions being true. I want to do this, but otherwise we want to do something else. We make decisions all the time during a day. Okay, should I take the stairs or should I take the elevator? Okay, that's a decision, right? When you wake up, okay, what should I have for breakfast? For some people, they have choices. For other people, they just stick with a certain, constant, diet, and they don't, have to make any changes. But we deal with change. We deal with decision making all the time, and the most basic decision making mechanism in programming is called a conditional statement. So I'm going to use an example. Okay, so we'll talk about conditions here. So a condition is essentially a question where the answer can only be true or false. Now, when we ask questions in a normal sense, we don't really use true or false as an answer unless you work or unless you're in a military kind of context. Can someone tell me, when a drill sergeant asks a cadet a question, what do you think the cadet is supposed to answer with? Sir, yes, sir. And then there's another one is affirmative versus negative. Okay, affirmative means yes. Okay, what you said is true, and then negative means what you said is not true. Okay, so the drill sergeant may ask a cadet, "Did you make your bed today?" And then the cadet will say, "Affirmative, sir." That means yes. Okay. But it gets tricky if we use the answer of yes or no. It gets a little bit tricky because different languages treat the questions a little bit differently. So I'm going to give you an example here. So the example is variable x not greater than variable y? So let's just say that x is 2 and y is 3. Okay, so make that assumption. X has a value of 2, y has a value of 3. Is variable x, which is 2, not greater than variable y, which is 3? In English, the proper answer to this question is yes. Okay, but in some other languages like Chinese, the answer is supposed to be no because it depends on the context. Okay, so it is not clear. Okay, either way, it is not clear how I'm supposed to answer the question. So instead of asking questions like these, we ask the question of, is it true or false that x is greater than y? Okay, or x is not greater than y. But either way, the answer is either true or false. Is that okay? Does everybody understand why we want the answer to be kind of restricted to just true versus false? Okay. So this is something that is fundamental to programming classes. So no matter where you are in your career or when you're in classes, every computer science class basically would evaluate conditions so that the condition always come back with an answer of either true or false. So I'll be good with that. The importance of using just the words true versus false, but not to use the words yes versus no. All right, cool. All right. So the next section here talks about what kind of question can come back with an answer of true versus false. So there are 6 comparison operators. These things you have used a lot already. It's just that the symbol for some of these may look a little foreign to you. So greater than, okay, I think we are all familiar with the symbol of greater than. The left hand side is greater than the right hand side. But when you see something like that, it is not a confirmation. It is always posed as a question. Is the left-hand side greater than the right-hand side? And I just made a mistake because I just asked a question that it does not demand an answer of true versus false. So I should have asked, is it true or false that the left-hand side is greater than the right-hand side? Is it good? Is that okay? So now we have less than, greater than or equal to, I know the fancy way, or most people like to write it, or in your, algebra classes, they write it like this, right? Well, Find that symbol for me on the keyboard. It does not exist. Now, does that mean that we cannot make that symbol happen? Well, we can make that symbol happen, but it's not easy. It is much easier to type it as greater than followed by equal sign. So that's why, in programming, in most programming languages, it is expressed as greater than or equal to with a greater than sign followed by a equal symbol. Is that okay? So this one is pretty universal. Okay, the standard is used in C, C++, Java, JavaScript, I think Python too. There are only very few languages that do not use this standard. Same thing applies to less than or equal to. Is it true or false that the left-hand side is less than or equal to the right-hand side? That's what this symbol represents. So now we get to not equal to. Not equal to is an exclamation point followed by the equal symbol. So I know that doesn't look natural to you. Who would use the exclamation point in the case to say negation, okay, which means not, okay? Well, as it turns out in C, C++, and all the languages that are derived from C and C++, that's kind of universal. An exclamation point means not, okay? And the last one is equal to. And this one can be very confusing as well, because when people look at a single equal sign in other contexts, they go like, well, that means equal to. But in programming, what does that mean? Remember from the previous module, when we see a single equal symbol, what does it mean? Assignment. It means assignment. Okay. So when we use a Yep. So one is comparison. Okay. Double equal to is comparison. Is it true or false that the left-hand side equals to the right-hand side? The value of the left-hand side equals to the value of the right-hand side. That's double equal. When we use a single equal, it means let's do something. Okay. Let's evaluate the right-hand side, get a value, and then use that value to update the left-hand side. So those two are completely different types of operation. One is an update, the other one is a simple um, comparison. We just need to know is it true or false that the two sides are the same. Unfortunately, the syntax of C and C++ and most languages derived from C and C++ use a very confusing symbol for assignment versus equal to, and there are cases where people will use the wrong operator in a program. Then you guys go like, but they should not go to similar places. Okay, when we use equal to, we should go, that should only appear in places where you expect, to get a result of true versus false. Okay, and later on we'll know that those are called Boolean values. And equal to, okay, meaning assignment, should only happen, when you're not in a condition. Okay, you're not expecting something that is returning either true or false. Well, you would think that is the case, but in C and C++ programming, that is not the case. You can use the wrong operator, and then syntactically, it is still okay. So the compiler can basically go like, well, that doesn't seem like a good idea, but since you seem to know what you're doing, I'll just let you do it. And then your program is not going to work. And then you'll be scratching your head. And then later on, somebody will say, isn't that supposed to be a double equal and not a single equal? You go like, yeah, that happens a lot, even to seasoned programmers. Okay, so one thing, this is something that you can jot down. It's not going to be very important in this class, but in the next class and all the other classes using C and C++, it can be very useful, is to turn on and read all the warnings from the compiler. Okay, now we haven't even talked about what is a compiler. Okay, well, I'll just say that the compiler is what translates C and C++ code to what the machine can actually understand. Okay, in other words, it is a necessary step in order to run your program. But in order to perform that step, it can also check the sanity of your code, so to speak. Okay, so if you use equal equal versus a single equal in the wrong context, the compiler can be intelligent enough to notice that and go like, I'm not sure you really meant to do it here. Okay, so pay attention to the warnings when you are compiling a program. That can save you a lot of time down the road. Okay, yes, go ahead. Say again. Python? Nope, we are not learning Python in this class. We are going straight into C and C++. Yep, yep. You mean Python? You can learn Python by yourself. It is useful. So let me kind of talk about why I do not teach Python in this class, because I know most other professors teach Python in CISP 300. Okay, number one reason, why are you in this class? What is the next class that you're planning to take after this one? 360? I got one person saying 360. What about the rest of you? Does anyone not want to take CISP 360 after this class? Yep. So 480 is not shorter. So CISP 480 is a combination of CISP 300, which is what you're in right now, combined with CISP 360. So they roll two classes into one, and it's a 5 unit class, as opposed to 3 plus 4, which is a 7 unit combination. It saves you one semester as well, but you're combining the content into one single semester. So, some people like it because they save one semester and they save 2 units, and other people do not like it because they would like some time to really absorb the concept from 300 before they move on to 360. So that's kind of a personal choice, I would say. But 480 is already ongoing, so there's no way you can enroll in 480 now unless you really talk to the professor, talk to the dean, and if they say okay, you can still do it. Oh, you're in 480? Oh, okay, sure. Yep. Right. So if you're already thinking that okay, I'm gonna take okay, let me just kind of put a picture here. Okay, CISP 300, which is where you're at, goes to CISP 360 because CISP 300 is a prerequisite of CISP 360. That goes to CISP 400 as well as CISP 310, which I also teach. Okay, 310 I teach, 400 I do not. CISP 400 goes to CISP 430, and in CISP 430, I'm going to put a dotted arrow here to CISP 440. Now, CISP 440 is not a programming class, so what programming languages you have learned do not really matter all that much in CISP 440, so it's not a big concern. But the other classes, okay, I'm going to circle in a different color so it is more visual. This class, this class, this class, and to a certain extent, this class here, they all depend on what you learn in C and C++, not Python. So if I were to use Python to teach this class, then you will still have to learn C and C++. So all that time that I teach something that is specific to Python is not a good use of your time or my time. That's the way I look at it. Okay? Correct. Now, does that mean Python is not useful? Nope, that is not what I said. Okay? Python is extremely useful still, but in terms of the classes that you will be taking, it is not going to be very helpful. So that's why I just decided, well, why do I want to teach something that you're not going to use? I might as well just teach you something that you will be using. Okay. I just need to find a way to kind of ease into C and C++. The only reason why people use Python is because, one, there are a lot of textbooks on Python online or in print, but there are just as many books in C and C++, so that is not a big reason. The main reason has to do with C and C++ are considered a more difficult programming language because of the syntax. Okay, and that is why we first started off with, guess what? BNF. Okay, we first started off with how do we understand the syntax? In other words, where do we put the punctuations? Okay, what is on the left hand side of this thing? What is on the right hand side of this thing? And so on. So we make that part very clear as early as possible. So that way, stacking additional concepts on top is not going to be as difficult. Yes, go ahead. Okay, so the funny thing is there's a whole family of languages that have very similar syntax. So the whole family is C, C++, which is an extension of C, Java, and to a certain extent, a large extent, JavaScript. These are all very similar in terms of the syntax. Now, are they exactly the same? No, I wouldn't say exactly the same. But if you have mastered C++ already, the transition to Java, which those of you who want to transfer to stack state, you have to do that. It's going to be fairly easy. Okay, it's not going to be a very difficult kind of thing to do. Once you understand C++ and potentially Java, transitioning to JavaScript is also going to be very easy. Python kind of stand on its own, okay, in terms of syntax, because it uses indentation to mean nesting, to indicate the level of nesting. And see, this entire family of programming languages do not care about indentation at all. Indentation is just for you so that you can tell which statement is inside which other statement, but otherwise it's not used. Now, we haven't had a chance to really have to talk about indentation, but what I'm trying to say is that the syntax of Python is different from this entire family. It is kind of like on its own a little bit. The concept of programming does not change. Okay, so the constructs do not change. How the constructs are expressed is different between the programming languages. And this is one big family of programming languages that are each one is useful and popular and used a lot in industry. And Python is also used in industry, but in terms of syntax, it is somewhere out here on its own. So that's the reason that this is another reason why I think understanding the syntax of C++ is more helpful based on what you need to do to graduate from here. Is that okay? So I want to explain the rationale behind the decisions, just so that you guys understand. Oh, okay, so that is why this particular CISP 300 is using C and C++ and not Python. Are we good so far? All right, cool. So returning back to the concept of comparison, do we have any questions about these six comparison operators? The concept should not be foreign. It's just that the symbols that we use for these things looks a little bit like, ugh, why would you use that, right? Well, unfortunately, this is how C and C++ works. Are we okay so far? Okay, all right. So now with the concept of comparison, we'll also take a look at logical operators. So logical operators is going to be, okay, I'll give you a preview, okay, just so that by the time we get to logical operators, you guys would already have some understanding of what they are. It's just a fancy name for the English words and, the word or, and the word not, okay? So let me ask you, do you know, can you differentiate between the word or versus the word and in English or whatever the equivalent words are in your native tongue? Well, okay, there's or and then there's either or. Okay, those are different as well. Okay, let me give you a scenario. Okay, so let's just say that a fast food chain decides that in order to get the latest toy car, you can be a male or under the age of 10. That's the condition because the concept is men are more childish than women, which I do not disagree. Okay, so if I walk into that fast food chain and I ask, "Can I have that toy car?" Do you think I can get one? Okay, cool. And if my wife, which is about my age, walks into the same fast food chain, would she be able to get a toy car? She won't be able to get one unless she says, I'm getting this for my husband, my childish husband, right? Okay, and if my well, I don't have kids, under that age anymore. So if I bring along, a child who is in elementary school, okay, do you think that girl, okay, the school age girl, would be able to get that toy? Yeah. Okay. So that's or, right? What if I change it to and? What if I change the condition to man and under the age or male and under the age of 15? In that case, can I get a toy? No, because I have to meet both requirements when the word and is specified. Now, when we use the word or, okay, to get back to your point of um, either or implies it can only be one or the other, but not both at the same time. So I am both male and um, oh, okay, that would not be a good example. So I need to bring a kid, okay, a boy who is like, let's say 10 years old. So the boy who is less than 10 years old is both male and under the age of 15, meeting both conditions when the or word is used. Well, the boy can get a toy too, because or means we need to satisfy at least one of the specified criteria. But if both are met, not a problem. Is that okay? So there's a differentiation between or and the phrase of either or, because either or implies you have to meet only one of the conditions, or means you can meet one or more of the conditions. Okay, so that's kind of important. But we'll talk about those, in a more formal setting later on. So right now we kind of dive right into conditional statements. And the task that I'm giving myself, okay, I'm not going to show the code yet. So the task that I'm giving myself is I need a mechanism to find the maximum of two variables. So I'll give you two variables. Let's call them x and y. And I need to find the maximum of the two and then store the maximum into variable z. Okay. So the way that we usually do things in the previous module, which is just assignment statements, is not going to work because we don't know, whether x versus y, which one is larger, and we want to store the larger one into variable z. Is that making any sense? Okay. So in that case, what we need is a conditional statement. So the conditional statement looks like this, and I'll show you, how to interpret that. So the conditional statement or the algorithm, a simple one, is like this. It says if x is greater than y, then z equals to x, else z equals to y. Okay. So when you look at the code like this, some people can understand it right away, and other people look at this and go like, I'm not really sure what that means. Okay. So I'm going to show you a picture of what that means. So the picture, which is down here, not this one, but this one here, and unfortunately, I don't know why it is uh, smaller than it should be. Okay, but it's kind of a hand-drawn, kind of map. Okay, think of this as a trail map. Okay, when you go to a hiking trail. Okay, there's a sign here. Okay, so there's a post, and the sign says, "Is x, what is the answer of x is greater than y? Is it true or is it false that x is greater than y?" So you look at the sign and you go like, okay, you think of an answer, okay, either true or false. If the answer is true, then you follow the left branch in this case. If the answer is false, you follow the right branch in this case. In other words, you can only take one and only one of the two paths, the alternatives. And the way you choose which path to move on to follow is to answer the question on the post. Is that okay? Now, do we make decisions like this all the time? Yes. Okay. The first time you get into this building and you go like, oh, I need to go to the bathroom. You walk into that little space back there and you make a decision. Okay. Do I go to men's room or do I go to the ladies' room? That's a decision right there. Okay. So we make decisions like this all the time. So if the answer is true, then this is what you do. Okay, you say, okay, z should get the value of x, and this symbol here, I use this little symbol here in some of the documentation to make it clear that this is assignment. It's not a single equal symbol. Okay, and this picture also was drawn a long time ago before I started to use C syntax to teach this class. The else branch, on the other hand, is saying y is used to update to z. But either case, if you're done with this step, you just exit. If you're done with this step, you just exit too. In other words, these two are alternatives to each other. You only take one of the two branches. So is that concept okay? Well, it's not wrong. It is just whichever path you take depends on the um, answer to that question. So you first have to read the question and then you come with an answer, which is either true or false. If it is true, you follow the branch that is labeled true. If it is false, you follow the path that is labeled false. But the point is, when you get to this part over here, which is what we call the true branch, you perform whatever it specifies and then you exit. If you go to the other branch, you do exactly the same thing. You just execute whatever this specifies, and then you also exit. There's no going back. Okay? So I'll be doing okay so far with this syntax. I mean, not syntax, the this is the semantics. Okay, this is what it means to have a conditional statement. There's a condition to evaluate. There are up to two branches. Okay, one branch corresponds to what you need to do when the condition is true. One branch corresponds to what you need to do when the condition is false. But the two branches merge, after they are performed, and then exit at exactly the same point. Are we good? All right. So this is the semantic, or what a conditional statement does, and then the syntax of the conditional statement looks like this. Okay. So it is just a representation of that picture. Um, and we'll talk about the actual BNF in just a little bit. So the word if and the word else need to be spelled exactly the way they are, okay? And then the condition on that post that you need to ask has to be in parentheses. In this case, x is greater than y is the condition that we're asking. Is it true or is it false that x is greater than y? Then the next part that is confusing, okay? The next part is confusing because as soon as the condition ends with a close parenthesis, you expect one statement that corresponds to what we need to do when the condition is true. You are limited only one statement, okay? And we'll talk about how to get around that limitation in the next module. But for now, we just know that there's one single statement. When this statement is after this statement is specified, then optionally you have a word else, and then after that, then you also specify what to do if and only if the condition is false. So are we doing okay so far corresponding the picture with the code? In other words, let me zoom back out a little bit so you can see both the pseudocode and the picture. There's no easy way to do that unless I also move this into its own window and shrink it, then I can display it side by side like so. Okay, so that's a good way to present both the code and also the semantic at the same time. Do we have any questions corresponding between those two? Yep, go ahead. The conditional statement. Yep. But they both represent the logic of we have to evaluate a condition first, which is, is it true or false that x is greater than y? Based on the answer to that question, if x is indeed greater than y, then we want z to get the value of x. And if not, then we want z to get the value of y. So they're both representations of the same logic, which is what we want to do because we want z to be the maximum of x and y. So are we good with this? Because I think part of the difficulty of programming is to associate the representation in code with the actual meaning of the logic that you want to represent. So are we doing okay so far with that? Okay, excellent. A flowchart is a way to represent logic. Mhm. So the logic is that there's no intrinsic representation of the logic. You can describe it in words to another person. You can understand what it is supposed to specify, and you can do whatever it specifies in the correct way, but it has no intrinsic representation. So when you need to communicate that logic to somebody else, either you can use words like what I'm doing right now to communicate that to another person, or you can use C syntax, or you can also use a picture to represent the same thing. A flowchart is just a whole lot easier to draw than this. Okay, this actually took me quite a bit of time. When the flowchart is a whole lot easier to do, and there are tools out there that you can use to draw flowcharts. Okay. Any questions? We're good. Okay. So now we can move on to talk about the next item, and this is the flowchart. Okay, since we were talking about flowchart, so this is the flowchart of exactly the same logic. So with inside the flowchart, you can see there are different shapes. Okay, I am not really big on flowcharts. Okay, so if you guys are going like, oh, do we have to understand which one is a terminal, which one is a diamond, which is a decision-making point, and where things can merge, and a rectangle means process, a parallelogram means input output, and so on. The answer is no, I really don't care. Okay, because the flow charting, I'm only using gonna I'm only going to use flow charting at the very beginning of this class, and then after that, I'm not going to flow chart anything. Okay, because flow charting is not a very concise way to describe things, and in a very interesting way, it encourages bad programming practice. So we'll get to that point when we talk about it. Okay, um, it becomes more apparent when we get to loops, and we're not quite there yet. Okay. So this is a flowchart. Okay, in a flowchart, if you use a flowchart to represent the logic of anything, you always want to designate this is where we start, which is kind of like the pre. Okay, it is just an indication of this is where we start. We start right here. Okay, and a matching end, which is called a end, terminal here. It just marks, oh, if you get here, then there's nothing else we need to do according to the specified logic. So it just makes it very clear. This is where we start. This is where we end. Okay. And then in between, you follow the direction of the arrows. Okay. That's why they're arrows. Okay. So the only point where it is kind of interesting to say something about is a diamond always represents either a way to split the path into alternative paths or a place where two paths merge into one single point. Is that okay? So that's the context of using a diamond. Okay, either you're splitting a path into two, but you have to choose one or the other, or you have two paths merging into the same point, and then they just exit through the same exit. So now, because in this particular diamond, we have a Boolean expression. Boolean means something that is either true or false. If the answer is true, we follow the branch that is labeled true. This is what we're going to perform, and then we get to here, and then we end. If the answer is false to this question, then we follow the false branch, then we perform the other operation, and after that, we also just go to the end. Is that okay? All right. Let me see if I can show you the actual code to do this. Nope, it does not have an option to do that. So I create these diagrams using a language called Mermaid. Now, don't ask me why it is called Mermaid, but it is called Mermaid. Yeah, it allows you to specify flowcharts like this using just words. You just have to describe what each node, what each box looks like, what is the text in the box, and which box go to which other box, and it will automatically figure out the best way to line up everything and so on. Okay, so it's kind of cool. Okay, it's a great little feature if you guys are interested in it. Okay, so are we? Well, okay. Let me go ahead and take roll, okay, because I think there's enough material right now, and I did not set the time of the roll taking correctly, so I need to reset that time first, and then I'll make it visible. All right, so let me go change the time because the due date right now is 10 o'clock, and we are pretty much past due right now. So I'll go ahead and change that. All right, so we'll change it to 10:15. Okay. I don't think anyone is going to come in between now and 10:15, so I think it's fair to put it to 10:15 a.m. Save and publish, and then I'll double click on the access code. It is just block. So go ahead, sign in to Canvas right now, and go to the activity called roll on 2025-0203, which is today's date, and use the access code to get in. In fact, I'm going to do it with you, okay, so I can show myself that I am actually in attendance today. All right, so this is what it's going to look like to you when you click on it. So you click, take the quiz. So please do it, okay? This is how I take roll. If you don't do this for enough times, I'm going to drop people. So remember to do this. Block, BLOCK is the access code. So let me just put it here, BLOCK, all in lowercase. And then you click submit. And it won't even ask you a question because I did not put a question here. All you have to do, okay, this part is also important because some people forget to click your submit quiz, is you have to click submit quiz. You will end up with, if it shows you that you have a score of 0 out of 0, you're good. Because on my end, it shows that you have participated in this activity, which is my way of taking role in this class. So give you guys a little bit more time to do this, to complete this, and switch back to here so that we can continue with the syntax, the actual syntactic rule of how we express a conditional statement. So has anyone checked out the video recording of this class? Okay. Yeah, yeah. Was it useful? Okay. Just being able to kind of go back to the lecture itself. Yeah, exactly. So this way, as long as you remind me to hit the record button, because sometimes I forget. So that's kind of important. That means, you don't have to be too busy writing down everything that I talk about. Because, if you know that, whatever I say and whatever is on the screen is going to be recorded, then you can focus on some other things, which, is listening to your own thoughts. Okay, and noticing, okay, I may not be fully understanding this concept. Okay, just put a little check mark on your notes so that you can spend some extra time to try to digest that portion. Does anyone need any more time for the road taking activity? Nope. Okay. All right. So if that is the case, then we move on to talk about the syntax of a conditional statement. So once again, this is the BNF. Okay. So the first thing I want to say is a little bit out of order, which is the last one. It's like, Tag, don't you want to do things in order? Well, the thing is, ordering is not really that terribly important in this case. So a statement can expand to a conditional statement, which means, oh, now we have another type of statements. The first type of statement that we encountered was from the previous module, which is the assignment statement, which is always as, right, the left-hand side equals single equal to the left, well, the other way around. The left-hand side single equal to the right-hand side, and then the semicolon. Okay, that's an assignment statement. So now we are saying, oh, that's another alternative. A statement can expand to a conditional statement. Okay, So what does a conditional statement look like? This is the portion that talk about the overall construct of a conditional statement. A conditional statement, which is a token, can expand to the following. If is in boldface, which means it is a terminal. Well, it's a terminal, which means it has to be typed verbatim as IF. Okay, it has to be spelled as IF. The open paren is also in boldface, which means the parenthesized expression, which we call a condition here, has to be parenthesized. If you do not use parentheses, the compiler will give you an error. Okay, so inside here is another token called condition, and we'll explain what a condition is later on. And then it's followed by a then statement, and then this is okay. This is not supposed to be here. And then we have an else part. There's nothing here, by the way. Okay, there's nothing visual you can see here. There's an else part, not else statement. Okay, note else part, which is optional. Okay, so if I don't select anything, I think it's a little bit easier to read. So the else part is optional. That then statement is not optional. Okay, so what is a then statement? The then statement is just a statement. Okay, so somebody is probably already making that association. So, does that mean the then statement can be another conditional statement? The answer is yes. Okay, that's the whole point of nesting. Okay, a statement can be a conditional statement, a statement can be an assignment statement. So, any place where a statement can be expected, it can be a conditional statement. It can also be an assignment statement. Is that okay? Because that point is kind of important. Later on, we'll see how why that is important. In the same module, there's an illustration. What about the else part? The entire thing that is supposed to follow the then statement. Else part expands to the, the terminal else and the token of else statement. So that means if you want to specify anything to execute if and only if the condition is false, you have to use the word else after the then statement in order to say, wait, hold on a second here. This conditional statement is not done. I got something else to do if and only if the condition is false. Okay. So what about the else statement? Well, the else statement is just a statement. That's all it is. So the else statement can expand to a statement. What kind of a statement? Well, at this point, we have two kinds of statements already introduced. Conditional statement, which is what we're talking about now, and the assignment statement, which we have already talked about in the previous week. Is that okay? Kind of? No, not okay? All right. So which part? Okay, can you formulate a question? Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the one that we already have and see if we can identify how things are processed. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And to do that, I'm going to use my tablet. So this part is not in the notes itself. So I'm going to start up my notepad here, screen copy. There we go. And then drag it over here. All right. So what I'm going to do is I will, as soon as I find the pen, which I don't know where I have put it. Uh-oh, this is not good because I forgot my stylus. I did not bring my stylus. Hmm, how is that possible? Pretty sure I brought it along. I just don't know where I stash it. I don't think my cell phone stylus is gonna work on my tablet because this one is Bluetooth and that one is a Wacom type. Yep. Oh, it does work. Okay. Backup. Always have a backup. Okay. Maybe. Oh, there we go. It does work. Excellent. Okay. And somehow it's using portrait mode when it's supposed to be in landscape mode. All right, so let me see if I can get it back into. That is weird. It just got everything opposite. Okay, well, that's fine. And then now it crashed. All right, one more time. Technology. All right, there we go. Okay, now it's good. Okay, so the statement that we had started off with if, and then x is greater than y, then we say z equals to x, semicolon, else z, sorry, let me do the proper thing. Otherwise, z equals to y, semicolon. Okay. Then you guys go like, but Tech, you use multiple lines to do the same thing. Well, C, C++, Java, JavaScript, they really do not care about the whole thing of where do you break something into a new line. Okay? You can type the entire thing on a single line and it still means exactly the same thing. Okay? So that's one of the things about C and C++ and the whole family that is different from Python. To Python, where you break into a new line to the next line is actually significant. It is important to Python. But in C and C++, it does not matter at all. Okay? So now we look at this and go like, okay, so how do we look at this thing here? So I'm going to simplify things a little bit here, and we'll just say that this entire thing is recognized as an assignment statement. Okay, that's based on what we learned last in the previous week, right? So we have a left-hand side which is z, we have the single equal symbol, and then we have a right-hand side which is x, and then the whole thing is ended with a semicolon. It is now an assignment statement. Is that okay? All right, so we'll call this an assignment statement. And then we go like, oh, kind of same thing here. Even though it's a different one, it is still just an assignment statement. Are we good so far? Okay. You look at this and go like, okay, and then what do we do? Well, an assignment statement is a statement. In other words, a statement can expand to an assignment statement, which now means, oh, okay, this whole thing is just a statement. And this whole thing is just a statement. Is that part okay? Well, if you want me to do so, I can actually go back to the notes to show you why I can make that association. So let me see. Do I still have? Nope, I don't have that up anymore. So when we go back to the assignment description, okay, let me go back here. Should have opened a new tab. And then we go to the um, BNF right there. Okay, so do you see how a statement can expand to an assignment statement? Which means, yeah. So if you see an assignment statement, you can then recognize it and go like, oh, okay, an assignment statement is just a statement. Is that okay? And this is why we can, do that thing that we did earlier in the tablet like this. Okay, so now what do we do? Well, we look at this and go like, we'll just call this a condition. A condition is an expression that returns an answer of either true or false. Okay. The actual syntax of a condition is way too complicated to talk about in this class. So when we see something that returns either a true or a false, we just say, okay, we'll just call that a condition. Is that okay? Okay. So now you go like, okay, what can we do about this? Well, do you see the do you see the terminal if here? Okay, so there's a terminal if, there's a condition, there's an open paren, there's the condition, here's the close paren. Followed by what? Followed by a statement. And then followed by what else? Well, this is a statement, this is else. So these two combine to else part, right? So now you can say, oh, okay, so now we see every single component in a conditional statement, in the BNF of a conditional statement, which starts with a terminal of if. You have to have the open paren, followed by a condition, followed by a close parenthesis, followed by a statement of some kind. Okay, it doesn't really care what statement, but we need a statement. And then followed by optionally an else part. The else part has to start with the terminal or the word else, and then followed by any kind of statement. Is that okay? So I'm basically teaching a few concepts at the same time. I'm teaching the concept of what is a conditional statement, what does it do, and why do we need it. That's one thing. That's the semantic, the meaning of a conditional statement. But I'm also reinforcing the concept of BNF. How do we use the syntax description to understand what can we put here or what is needed here? Okay, because that is how you actually end up writing code, is you have to understand the rules of what can go where, and what cannot go where, and so on. So this is kind of like me teaching two different tracks at the same time: conditional statement as a concept, conditional statement in terms of the syntax, the grammar. Are we doing okay so far with this? Okay. It might take you a little bit more time to kind of really let it sink in, because this is how a lot of things in computer science and math are like this. You're basically recognizing something and go like, oh, this is just one of those things. And then when you look at some of the things that are in the sequence, then you combine those into say, oh, okay, these together is just one of those things. So that's how a compiler works, is it analyzes what you put in, what you type into the program, and it will do some kind of analysis like what we are doing now. Obviously a little bit more complicated and much more mechanical, but that's how the program is interpreted by the system, by the computer. All right. Um, So this is still getting recorded, okay? So if you do not have enough time to draw the entire picture, it is, at the time of, yeah, this is the current time, so you can just kind of write down the time mark here. So if I were to go back, because I want to kind of let you guys know what we'll be talking about after this. So let me, oh, okay, I just skip. There we go. Nope. Uh, There we go. So we are in module 0013, and this is the syntax. And then the next thing we're going to do is to talk about logical operators, which we touched on already. Okay, it is about the word and, the word or, and the word not in conversation. But in programming, they have special symbols. So the logical operators, this is and is represented by two ampersand symbol, not a single one. And then or is represented by two vertical bars, and then not, once again, is represented by an exclamation point. Okay, so try to read ahead of the class. Okay, so on Wednesday, we'll come back and continue our discussion starting with the logical operators. Okay, they are not really difficult concepts. We use it already. This is a formalization of what we already intuitively know. Okay, so the most important part is to relate this to how you use the words and or not. The symbols may look a little foreign, okay, but the concepts are not really foreign to us. Okay, so that's going to be where we pick up on Wednesday. All right. So the homework assignment, don't worry about it. Don't even get started because we have not really gotten enough material to get the homework started. If you want to look at it, that's fine, okay? But don't try to work on it. Don't try to finish it because we have not really talked about those concepts yet. All right. So I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Have a good rest of the day, and I'm gonna